Now, if you have your Bibles, if you would meet me, we will jump right into it. Psalm, the 137th Psalm, 137, 137th Psalm. When you get there, say something. If you're not there yet, say, hold on. Psalm 137, and if you have your physical Bible, we give you a little life hack. You just split it right in half, and you'll be in the Psalm. Psalm 137, Psalm 137. The 137th Psalm. When you get there, say, I'm there. If you're not there yet, too late. Just look up at the screen. Verse number 1. And it reads, by the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down. Yea, we wept. We wept when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they that carried us away captive required of us a song. And they that wasted us required of us mirth or amusement, saying, sing us one of those songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Lord's songs in a strange land? How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Right before you take your seats, if you would look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I can't flow to this beat. You may be seated. Though our timing may have been different, like many of you, this week has brought me an unusual grief. An unusual grief. I was grieved this week with both a reflective and prophetic grief. I was grieved this week with both reflective. As I look back and reflect, there was grief that came to my heart. But as I consider the days ahead, I was struck by a bit of grief. We all have different wiring. Mine tends to be, I skew a little bit prophetic. And sometimes before something happens, as it relates to devastation or unusual circumstance, there is a prophetic grief that sets in. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians, if you look at the first and the second chapter, there's a progression toward the end of the first going into the second, where it says the spirit that we possess searches all things, even the deep things and the thoughts of God. And it goes on to reveal that the Spirit of God that searches the mind of God reveals the mind of God to our mind, so that the things of God are made known to us. Sometimes before they happen, before we can place through empirical circumstance a difficulty or challenge, we will feel grieved. And for much of this week, I felt that grief, and it was fleshed out as we saw another senseless murder of a man attempting to protect someone. He never imagined that that would be his last day here on earth. So there was an unusual grief. I'm concerned with what is and with what is unfolding. But we'll put a pin there and come back to that in a moment. But I want to start with a little bit of my journey. For those who don't know, I'm a ex-MC. Not facilitating programs, but yeah, you remember. I used to be a rapper. What's so funny? I don't look like it now, but that's been some time. Around late elementary, early middle school, I began my rap career. I know you can't tell now, but imagine it. I had hair, a nice curly top. Y'all don't know about this. It was, they called it an S-curl. Younger people, I'm young still, not to be confused with a Jerry curl. That's your mama and them. Not to be confused with a Jerry curl. The S curl was a little bit shorter. And I didn't have a good S curl because I didn't go to the salon for mine. I put in my own Hawaiian silky. And so if you left it in too long, it was a curl, but the end, kind of like they said in Kings of Comedy when they talked about our dearly departed Luther Vandross, they said his curls didn't quite curl all the way. They began, but then they were straight on the end. That was a little bit of a hot mess. But that was the style back then. You put a little bit of gel in there. You put a little bit less jam, worlds of curls. Y'all remember that? I can't remember what the brown one was that you would put in your hair. And when it would rain, black stripes would go down your face and onto your shirt. You just didn't wear white. That's how you did it. And you play basketball, you didn't hoop too hard. When you started to break a sweat, you would just stop and say, "I'll be it, sub me in, sub me out." It was around that time. So now you get the picture, because you couldn't picture me as a rapper. And I had with my best friend a group, my best friend Jamel, who passed away a couple of years ago. I had with him a group, and our group's name was two of us, just two of us. Our group's name with twos was, ready for this, Too Hot to Handle. And my name was Wax. W-A-C-X. Wayne Anthony Chaney, but back then, Whack couldn't have been a good name. So I put an X on it. I was Wax. And I remember the line, never forget my best friend had a line, "I'm kicking it with Wax, eating Cracker Jacks, so homie, just relax." I had to create what they call in drama the illusion of the first time. I had to bring y'all in because you looked at me and you laughed when I said rapper. So now you have the picture. And we were pretty good. I mean, until I got to Long Beach, I didn't realize that I wasn't the best. My mom sent us to school away. We used somebody's address in Culver City when I was up in LA for a while, and I went to middle school in Culver City. I was the king of Culver. Until I got into a freestyle in Long Beach. I retired as soon as I got to Poly. I retired, and what's interesting is that I used to rap, and we would create these tracks. I never went to the studio, but our studio was, you would have two boom boxes that had recorders. On one, you would put the instrumental track, and you would press play. And then on the other one, you would press record, you would put your head in between and rap over the instrumental, and it would capture both the words and the instrumental. That was my demo tape. That's how we did it with two boom boxes. Couldn't tell us a thing. We would perform for parties and all those things, but one of my favorite things to do was to really test your skills. They don't really do this anymore. We used to test our skills on what's called freestyle. They do freestyle now, but they're just rehearsing written stuff that sounds like they're flowing. But back in the day, we really freestyle. It meant whatever was in the room, we took off the top of the dome and we began to rhyme based on what we saw, what we felt, what came to mind at that moment. And we were pretty good at freestyle, to the point that they would invite us to different competitions, and they used to gather in circles. If you go to a party, you would have some people that are smoking, you have some people that were macking, but then there was another group of people that were just rapping in a circle. They called it a cipher. I just want to make sure y'all knew that we're in the right place. And we would be in these ciphers, but if you were good enough, you would kind of graduate to the main stage. The DJ would play a track, you would get on stage, and you would freestyle at that moment. I loved to freestyle. It made you feel alive. It's where you would test your skills. And I was a pretty skillful freestyler. And so under most circumstances, they would play a track, and when they would play the track, you would ride the beat, ride the track, you would freestyle. But I remember one time we were out of town and they had a hometown favorite. They were giving them all the familiar beats. I mean, the stuff that they probably practiced, all the familiar beats. They would jump on it and they would freestyle right over it, and it was beautiful. It was our turn. They gave us a couple to set us up, but then put on a beat nobody had heard of, we had never experienced. When I tell you it was terrible, it was terrible. And a good MC usually can rhyme over any beat. I mean, that's part of it, right? But when they're giving your opponent all the best beats, and then they throw you something that you've never heard of before, something with no flow, no consistency, no continuity. It had all kind of strange noises flowing through the beat. And just when you thought you had it mastered, it kept the same rhythm and flow for about 10 to 15 seconds. But after that, it would change to something completely different. And this beat, y'all, was so whack that no matter how good I was, I couldn't do anything with it. I wondered if anybody was listening to what this DJ was doing to us, but because it was their hometown, they pretended like nothing was happening. And I started to think, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Until I realized it wasn't me, it was that this was a whack beat. And no matter how good you are, at some point you have to look at the DJ, number one, hoping that he'll stop. You have to tell him this beat's whack. And in the event that he doesn't hear you, sometimes you just have to give hand signals that this beat is whack. And so eventually I had to tell him this beat was whack. And I told him, after signaling him and him not stopping, I can't flow over this. Y'all, I couldn't flow over it. This is, in fact, what happens, if you allow me, I just contemporize what happened to the children of Israel who are reflecting upon the time that they were taken into captivity, into Babylonian captivity. It is in the lives of the former inhabitants of Jerusalem in this passage. That's who you hear speaking now. They were taken by their captors and the desecrators of their temple, the Babylonians. They not only took them from their land, after they took them from their land, they burned, they destroyed the temple that Solomon built. Their captors and desecrators of the temple, they asked them to do what they ordinarily did in Jerusalem. They looked at them. If you go back and look at your passage, in verse number 3, they said, hey guys, why don't you guys sing us one of them songs? Sing for us one of those songs that we heard about. We heard y'all are good singers. Sing us one of those songs that you sing in Jerusalem. Sing us a song of Zion. Now here's the picture. Stay with me. They're not in a great place. In fact, commentators would suggest that this is one of the heaviest psalms written, reflecting on one of the heaviest times for them collectively as a people since they've been freed from Egyptian slavery. This is a heavy time. And it's not that they're enslaved in the way they were in Egypt. In fact, in the Babylonian captivity, they took their temple, they desecrated their temple, they burned down the temple, they took them from their land, and they allowed them, there was a freedom of sorts to move around, to live, and to establish themselves. But now they're established under an empire that has rules that they have to play by. They don't have their own agency in the way that they had their own agency before. They don't have their own temple in the way that they had their own temple before. It's no longer a theocracy anymore. Their politics are changing. Not only are their politics changing, their theology is in tension at this moment. It is a devastating time. Now, I know for many of you, you just see it as relocation, but please understand, for them at that time, their temple was central to their culture and, follow me, to their worship experience. I wish I had time to break this down, but I don't. You've heard me share before, even as it relates to the Tower of Babel and those kinds of things. In ancient Mesopotamia, and after that point, there were temple structures that were built in the center of the city, and the city's glory was associated with how elaborate the temples were. If you remember, even before this period, they would create what's called, if you look like, not a classic pyramid, but stair steps that became increasingly narrow in ancient Mesopotamia were called ziggurats. And they would often be formed, and their display was to the glory of the city. And these ziggurats were called, or temples were called, the gate of the gods. Are you still here with me? Not necessarily for them to reach the heavens, but for their deity to come down and to bestow blessing there, what they call a gateway, a temple, or a ziggurat. It was central to that area, that region. It was sort of the glory of a city. Now later on, you find with the children of Israel, they had Solomon's temple there in the city, central to the city. And at that point, up until that point, listen to me, their encounter with God, at least their corporate encounter, was centered around the temple. The temple was significant because that is where primarily they understood how to connect with communally the divine God of heaven. So the temple was central and important because that's where they saw the presence of God. They weren't where we are, y'all. They didn't have the New Testament. They didn't have just a personal encounter with God. The resident presence of the Holy Spirit was not dwelling in each one of them literally. It came upon leaders for certain tasks, but it did not dwell in them like it does for us. They didn't have this concept of my personal relationship with the Lord. Up until this point, here was the idea. They corporately experienced God at the temple. Are you with me? So the temple was significant because that's where they saw the presence of God being, and the city was significant because that's where it housed the temple. And when they were not there and they had to pray, notice they would turn toward, even if they were in a foreign land, they would turn toward the direction of the temple to pray because it had significance, and that is where in earthly form, the resident presence of God would dwell. Not the omnipresence, God being everywhere at once, but the resident presence of God in their mind dwelt there in the temple. The manifest presence of God dwelt in the temple. So this is not just a small task. I want you to understand the heaviness associated with this. They were taken to a land. They weren't slaves. They were able to come and go as they pleased, but they were governed now by the Babylonians. And here it is. Their temple was burned down. Temple was significant because God's presence was known to be in that temple. But not only was their temple significant, their land was significant. Their land was significant because that's where the temple was. Temple was where God's presence was. And they burned down, the Babylonians burned down the temple and took them from their land, brought them to Babylon. And then when they got there, the Bible said there was such a heaviness. This idea is that this was heavy. The writer says, we sat by the brook of Babylon. Most of us misread this passage, and we use this passage to determine how we can still praise the Lord in difficult times. But that is not what this passage is saying. There is a palpable sadness that is to be felt with this passage. This is a passage not of rejoicing, but this is a passage of lament. This is not a light passage to tell us how to deal or to dwell in or to deal with adversity with cheer and with optimism, but this is a passage of sorrow, of reflection, of lament, and of protest. Don't you see it? He said, we sat there in Babylon, and the idea is that they were discouraged in Babylon. Here's what it says in verse number 2. It said, here's how sad it was. They were a rejoicing, singing people. In good times and in bad, worship was prescribed. Singing and making merry was prescribed, worked into they didn't just listen to music, but weaved through the fabric of their religious experience and faith was the idea of music. But this starts off as a passage of sorrow and of lament. How do I know? It says, because we hung up our harps. When we considered how heavy things were, we starts off, we hung up our harps. We can't function business as usual. And as we're sitting there, our captors, the ones that burned down our temple, took us from our land. They stand over us, here it is, and say, hey, why don't you guys muster up one of those songs that we heard you love to sing? We heard you guys are good singers. Hey, take your harps down off those willow trees and sing a song for us. What kind of song? One of those songs of Zion. Let me just put it another way. Hey, can you guys entertain us? When we brought you over, we thought we would get some of your culture over here. Entertain us. Sing one of those songs. Make merry. This is meant to be realized in tension. The listeners who understand the depth of their song. because weaved throughout the fabric again of their singing. It was not for entertainment. It was not simply for amusement, but there was righteousness that ran through their music. There was the will of God that ran through their music. There were matters of justice that ran through their music. There was how the natural that connects to the divine that ran through their music. It was how they were to relate to one another as people made in God's image that ran through their music. This was not to be taken lightly. It was not just their culture. It was their faith. It was not just their faith. It was their belief. It was not just their belief, but it was who they were. And they had now the Babylonians standing over them, making light of all that, saying, why don't you just sing us another song? Entertain us and yourselves with the stuff, follow me, that you usually sing. It is interesting. There is an incongruency of sorts. There, on one hand, the people that are experiencing oppression and the people that are oppressing. There are two vantage points. There are a group of people that are experiencing hardship and are grieving what they lost and grieving the change of normalcy and the free agency to walk around without being reminded of all they lost and having to figure out how to get along with those who took it. There are people that are in a tension. Well, on the other side, there are people that have no sense of that tension, and they just demand that we do as we've always done. It's almost like the Babylonians are confused. Just sing, man. It's just a song. I mean, you guys sang up to this point. What happened to your song? What happened to your usual flow? Why are you sitting over there sad? We know you can sing. Sing us a song. This passage is not given to us to figure out how we keep singing in difficult times. This passage is meant to be seen as attention, as incongruent. It is meant to be seen with the weight that they were experiencing. They said to their captors, how can we sing when we're in a strange? How do you expect us to carry on like we did before we were devastated? How do you expect to get the same response from us that you did when we had a temple and when we were in our place and when we served our God freely and when we were able to walk without the thought of oppression or harassment? How you expect us to keep singing like nothing's happening? How do you expect us to carry on like everything is normal? This ain't normal. This is strange. This is something ain't right. This is not the norm. This is strange. And if we carry on like we've been carrying on, just singing the same songs, on top of all this, like nothing is going on, we may mislead you into thinking that everything is okay with us, and that what is being perpetuated is okay. But as the people of God, we are not called just to sing through everything. We're not called to act as if things are normal, as everything else is going to hell in a handbasket. Because if anybody should raise alarm, if anybody should change their cadence and rhythm when stuff starts getting strange, it should be us. We can't sing and dance on top of this like it does not exist. That is not faith, that is escapism. And God has not called us to escape. He's called us to have dominion and subdue. God has not called us to escape. He's called us to engage. God has not called us to have vain optimism. God has called us to live in the tension between pain, but believing that ultimately God is going to work it out. But right now, we got to let you know that this hurts. We got to let you know that this is wrong. We got to let you know that something in here is strange. And you want me to flow over this whack beat. As if this is a familiar cadence. As if I'm set up in this rap battle to succeed. You want me to continue to do what I've done, perform the way I perform, to act as normal on top of all this? If you want me to sing what we've been singing as if nothing is going on, you're going to have to change that beat up, because I can't pretend like that is not whack. I can't pretend like that is not incongruent and inconsistent with what my God requires and prescribes. Because ultimately, we are not just singers, but we are like, as believers, the gauges on your car's dashboard. Could you imagine driving and the oil is running out, but the instrumentation still saying full? Could you imagine the tank on the verge of being emptied on fumes, and it says that your gas tank is topped off? Could you imagine driving without any indication that there's something that isn't right? These writers aren't teaching us how to sing in hard times. This is a protest to their captors, and they're functioning as the gauges on your car's dashboard. They say, hold up, this is not the time where we act as if things are normal. This is the time where we pull over to check this out. This is the time where we suspend business as usual. This is the time where we don't just sing over all these things and function over all these things and go to the break room smiling as if people are not being shot dead in the street and families are being ripped apart. And whatever your politics are, whatever your stance is on immigration, the reality is there should be humanity to the widow, to the orphan, and to, the Bible called it, alien. Are you still here with me? Whatever it is, there must be the nature of God, the nature of Christ, justice prescribed, no dehumanization. Are you still here with me? To sit on top of all that, to have church on top of all that, to go to work on top of all that, to go and buy Gucci on top of all that, without saying, this is strange. Something wrong. And let me just be clear. Anybody who does not see this as strange is strange. I don't care how you dress it up. I don't care how you try to tie biblical passages out of context into it. I don't care what your stance, what your position is. If you can't look around and say this is some strange stuff going on in here, you are strange. And I'm sorry for being the instrument cluster, but I need to tell you you're strange. I need to tell you you're strange before this whole engine blows up. I need to tell you you're strange before hopes of unity diminishes. I need to tell you that you're strange, and hopefully that'll arouse enough in you to second guess what you participated in or what you've been silent about. This is a strange land. I can't sing on top of this. I can't flow on top of this beat. Somebody holler out, strange, 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 strange. Can't just sing on top of all that. It would be, trying to flow on top of that beat, if I can contemporize it, it would be incongruent to function the same way on top of all that. Our flow ain't consistent with that beat. And if you flow with that beat, something's wrong with you. Let me go a little bit further. Parallel with our own times, to continue with our function as usual on top of the seismic movement of the earth shifting beneath our feet would be crazy. I can't just have my normal flow. I can't just have normal conversation. When I walk in the break room and I'm a little disturbed and you're asking me what happened to me personally, it didn't have to happen to me personally. The strange lands make you sick. Strange land makes you wish or dream or reflect upon a time where you still had challenges, but it wasn't these kind of challenges. Strange, strange, strange. We can't just do what we've been doing on top of this. What was once holy would be entertainment and rhythmically dissonant on top of this track now playing in our nation. Look at your neighbor, tell them we're in a strange land. Strange. And you can't expect me to do what I did the way I did it 10, 15 years ago, like we're in the same place. It would miss, listen to me, the lament necessary for this moment. This is not the moment. There's a place biblically, if you expand your repertoire, there is a place for upbeat, but this is not that moment. To sing on top of all this like nothing is going on would distract from the fact that this track is whack. And me continuing to flow over it could feel like I bought into the brainwash and am in agreement. You ever been, how many of you, this West Coast, I know you have, how many of you have been in the studio before? Raise your hand, in the studio. Even if it was your cousin with a karaoke machine in the garage, they called it the studio. Let me see, if you've been in the studio where they're recording, laying down tracks. I've been in studios, some in garages, some recording, real studios from LA to Atlanta to New York. I got friends everywhere, and I've been in studios where you walk in, the music was amazing, and you just couldn't wait for the world to hear what was coming. But there are other times where I've been in studio. You ever been in the studio where they're laying down tracks and they play for you what they just recorded, and they y'all ready for this? They hit play and they're like, I mean, where where they're real passionate about what they recorded, and you walk in late, and everybody's like bobbing their head. That's your part. And you walk in like, is it just me? Or is this track trash? Anybody ever, just me? I'm the only one? And you're saying to yourself, maybe this that new. Like I just haven't caught up to this yet. Because obviously everybody is bobbing their head to this like it's the hottest thing that ever dropped. And to me, this is garbage. French, garbage. Just me? Okay. And you sit there long enough and realize that people are being overcome and influenced not by the skill, the thoughtfulness, and the talent of the individual laying the track, but they bought into the passion of the one who was passionate about what's garbage. It kind of reminds me of where we are in our nation. And not just one individual, not just a president. In many respects, whatever your politic is, that's perpetuated and allowed things that are inhumane. But, I mean, it's reflective of our nation. It's people, when you look up and you see how they're bobbing their heads in the same way and finding agreement and celebrating things. Deep down, I mean, some people just crazy, but deep down, they have to know in their soul has to bear witness that this is wrong, that this is not good. I understand having to toe your party line. I understand intimidation. I understand how some people have chosen themselves over their conscience, but at some point, you even at least when they're not looking, just give the response that is needed. Let us know that you had to do it to keep your job, but let us at least know when we're privately discussing this at a home that you at least see that this is whack, so you can relieve me. Because I feel like I walked into a circus. Look at your neighbor, tell them this track is whack. I don't care what your politics are. This track is whack. Many who should be calling a spade have followed passion, party lines, and not logic, righteousness, principle. And some of y'all don't like the word justice. How you ban that? How you mad at justice? The stuff that we pick up and scrutinize from the Bible, stuff that Jesus never even mentioned, we make our number one issue when justice is all throughout the Bible, and you act like someone should be dismissed. Oh, they're too woke because they use the word justice. Have you read the Bible? If you don't like justice, how about this? Just dealings. And it's okay as a believer to do what they did. I want you to know, before we get into what we should do, I'm going to give you permission to not do. Because sometimes you need permission to not do so you can get yourself together to recalibrate so that you understand what you should do. Don't be so quick. And some of you in this place, all right, what do we do, brother, after all this? Like, we'll get there. We're so quick to react. We're so quick to react without reflection. And part of what's gotten us here is reaction without reflection. The Bible always gives space and room before we do to lament. In fact, if somebody died, there were days, are you with me, of lamenting before you could do anything. They had ceremonies for lamenting. They had physical things to remind them that they should be sad. Even they had sackcloth. They put on different clothes. They took off the Gucci and put on sackcloth and ashes. They threw ashes on themselves, and that was to give themselves permission to feel what they feel, to give themselves permission to feel what it's like to lose a temple, to feel what it's like to be relocated, to feel what it's like not to want to sing, to feel what it's like to say, I ain't singing for you. I ain't acting like you expect me to act. I need to sit for a while. You as a believer need to have permission to not just sing the songs you've been singing the same way you've been singing them right on top of all that, but to say, listen to me, before you do anything, this is whack. To reframe it, to feel what's whack. For a minute to say, listen, I can't tell you what I'm doing next, but I'm going to tell you what I'm not doing. I'm not going to keep doing what I've been doing like nothing's happening. We're not going to sit down at the lunch table and just say, well, we just have a difference of opinion. We agree to disagree. No, there's certain things that are politics. There are other things that are inhumane. There are certain things that are opinion. There are other things that are evil. And it is okay to nuance. It is okay for you to be a Republican and say, I denounce that. It's okay for you to be, listen to me, listen, it's okay for you to be in someone's party, in someone's cabinet as a representative and say, I don't stand by that. It's okay. It's okay. And I usually balance it, but I'm not even going to balance it right now. Because as it relates to what is manifesting and surfacing at this moment, and there are times where we've, others at all sides have gone to extremes, but I want to talk about what is perpetuating this. And sometimes trying to balance it all does not give a proper read on the instrument panel. And I'm not talking about all instruments, but as it relates to what we are seeing in our nation, it's whack. And we can't just flow over this whack beat like nothing's happening. All right, let me hear you say it's whack. What's whack? Here we go. I'm glad you asked me. Scapegoating a vulnerable outsider population, labeling them as criminal, disease, disloyal, economic threats. That is whack. Say that's whack. Law and order rhetoric used to normalize cruelty. Policies framed as legal, necessary, temporary. Police powers expanded for quote unquote safety. Let me hear you say that's whack. Dehumanizing language that precedes dehumanizing policy, calling people animals, parasites, disease vectors. The language usually comes before the violence. Many people say sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words create thoughts. Thoughts create beliefs. Beliefs create violence. Look at your neighbor, tell him it's whack. Centralization of executive power, emergency powers expanded, courts pressured or bypassed, civil service politicized, say it's whack. Targeting the press and redefining truth, media labeled enemy of the people, independent journalism undermined, state narrative elevated as truth, say it is whack. Religious institutions co-opted or silenced, accommodation, silence, national loyalty over moral witness. The confessing church becomes the minority, say it's whack. Normalization through fatigue, each policy alone being tolerable or seen as tolerable, resistance delayed because it's not that bad yet. We've even seen worse. Moral thresholds moved gradually, say it is whack. National identity fused with exclusionism. Listen, you're not true Americans. You are others. Citizenship tied to ethnicity and loyalty. It is whack. Say whack. Now, that's not America. That was the progression of Hitler in Nazi Germany before the extinction of Jews. Every single one of them. And what allows for it is for us to continue to sing and continue to live and continue to get along to go along to get along. This is not the warm-up. This is not a drill. Unidentified federal agents are accosting people. American citizens are being jailed and detained without cause. Individuals with their hands up, attempting to cover and protect the vulnerable, are being shot dead like dogs in the streets. This is not a drill. And we cannot continue to flow on top of this whack, I would cuss if I wasn't in church, track. All right, y'all, let's go home. Sometimes I need a moment to hang up my harp and to shut my mouth long enough to sit with it, to feel it. I love this picture that the writer paints. He paints a picture of movement and motion to one of, listen to this, we sat down. Do you know why many of us don't feel the pain of the loss and have not been able to observe the strange land that we're living in? Because we've been distracted and continue to move in the midst of stuff that just stop us in our track. They said we sat. And when we sat, we reflected. When we sat, we observed. When we sat, we realized that what we are called to bring to this world and what we are witnessing, they are incongruent. And for some of us who've sat long enough, we're trying to catch the beat, realizing we can't because this track is whack. How do you expect me to flow over that? I want to be clear. This isn't to withhold what God deserves, but to righteously protest the dire nature of reality. The moment of silence and departure from business as usual is not to withhold from God, but to expose that we are not in our usual place. And if we continue as usual, somebody may miss that. Somebody holler this whack. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Can faith and worship flourish in a season of desolation? I think so. But the question is, what is an authentic expression of faith in a strange land? What is a fitting flow over a whack beat? I think it looks something like this. From celebration to give ourselves a little bit of time for lament, to experience the heaviness, to feel, though it hasn't happened to you, your friends, or family yet, to feel the pain of other people. This Good Samaritan, who was the expression and embodiment of love. To answer the lawyer's question, Jesus gave that address. It said that he saw him from a distance and he came near. That's proximity. And as he got near to him, he felt compassion. That is empathy. After he felt compassion, he picked him up and did something about it. That is engagement. He took him to the end. He dropped him at the end, and that was not just momentary engagement. The case could even be made for equity, because he left him there and said, this is what I had to give. I've done my service to bring him here. But when I pass back through, if you need more to get him back up on his feet, whatever it takes to get him back up on his feet, because it is love, I'm going to obligate myself to be partnering with him until he gets back up on his feet. What does it look like? Here we go. 2 things and I'm done. Like me rapping over a whack beat, even as a proficient lyricist. Sometimes your voice or protest is enough to stop the beat and to bring back the one that is familiar enough to flow over. Sometimes you snap the DJ out of their stupor, if it was a legitimate mistake, by saying, yo, change that. Before we get too far about what's next, let's talk about what is. They at least voiced it. They said, listen, how are we going to sing when we're in a strange land? They labeled it as strange. They let them know that this was not normal. And sometimes the starting point is just to be clear about the fact that you're not crazy. I know everybody's bobbing their head to the music in the studio, but it's whack. You're not crazy. And I want to give you permission to say this beat is whack. Whatever your religion, whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your politics, on the human front, we've become so disoriented. We second guess ourselves and second guess our own judgment because others seem so confident that we think there may be something to it. Nah, whack is whack. And the first step is they use their voices. They say, how are we going to sing over this whack beat? Well, what does it look like? First step, sometimes is to use your voice. And here's the reality. I have a professor at Duke, and he was one of the top theologians according to Time magazine for this decade. His name was Dr. Stanley Horwath, and I was going to write, the original dissertation was how we as believers are going to use our faith to change culture and to change the world. And he laughed at me. He giggled to himself. It wasn't a dismissive laugh. It was just a you have more to learn laugh. He giggled to himself and said, the best you could hope for is faithful witness. I said, what are you? He wasn't suggesting that change could not come through people who are intentional about bringing about change in the world, but sometimes their discouragement sets in when we see ourselves as the world changer, the one that's going to change it all, because sometimes, as Dr. King says, that arc of justice is long. Sometimes it outlives us. And if we see ourselves as the ones going to change the world, sometimes frustration will set in. It feels like our efforts can be spitting in the wind. He gave me, it took me 3 years to unpack what he was saying. He recalibrated not my work. My work's going to be the same, but he recalibrated my expectation by saying the best you can hope for is not to be a world changer. Stop shooting at that. Here's what you need to shoot for. Be a faithful witness. What does it mean? It means go on the record for your conviction. And if it changes people, if they see it, if there's transformation, if there's a movement started, great. But you go on the record for your conviction. If people look at you and walk away because they want to bob their head to a whack beat, he says you go on the record. The reason that many of us don't open our mouth where we can, whether it is in our pulpits or whether it's with our group of friends or whether it is in the break room, the reason that we don't do it because we think that what we have to say won't change anything anyway. But God didn't put the transformation of the world on you. The world has a Savior, and God, we got to the end of the book. It's going to work out. But in our lifetime, the best we can hope for and what we should aim for is being a faithful witness. What is a faithful witness? A faithful witness is one who is willing to go on the record for their convictions. And even if people don't celebrate it, you know if you don't receive it in this life, you have a well done coming when you see him face to face. We don't need more world changers. We need more faithful witnesses. You going on the record for what's right. Number 2, and we're done. Sometimes there is a need to say nothing for a bar or two. As I think back about that whack beat that DJ put on, rather than ask him to cut it and walking away, I should have taken all the time I needed in silence to listen to it, to see what I could catch, to let a bar or two play before I tried to jump back in. Sometimes you need pause. You need to be okay when you have nothing to say or when you don't know what to say or you just identify. Sometimes your statement is one of solidarity, not solution. That I stand with you. That I see your pain. I see your hurt. I see you. Sometimes it's not to sing, it's not to flow, it's to take a beat. And if the beat doesn't change, sometimes the invitation from God is to change your flow to ride the beat. Sometimes it's worthwhile to pause long enough to ask God if the invitation is to demand that the beat be changed for a system that ain't changing, or if there's something in my flow that needs to change. And here is how it played out. It was not immediate. It was not instantaneous. I know we've said that with the right prayer, with the right message, with the right action, with the right march, it'll all change. But that is not how it always works out. Sometimes we sit in moments for a sustained period of time as faithful witness. But as it relates to these, the children of Israel, history for the people in the text bears out that two things happened. Number one, they eventually came out of captivity. Trouble don't last always. They eventually came out of captivity. But when they did follow me, their flow was never the same. And there are seasons that are marked in history. When we sit with it, when we allow ourselves to feel it, we are deepened by our pain. We are deepened by wrestling and sitting with injustice. We are deepened by not just continuing to sing over what pains us, but engaging what pains us. It is authentic faith that does not just overlook that blindly, but authentic faith finds what God is doing in the midst of all of those things. And when you emerge from that place, usually there's a more authentic faith that comes with you. Before exile, God was experienced in or tied to the temple. Somebody sees where I'm going. But after they came out of the exile, after they wrestled, after they lamented, after they experienced sorrow, after all of those things, it wasn't easy, but they came out. And when they came out, listen to me, they went into the exile with a centralized faith. They came out of the exile with a decentralized faith. What changed? As they gave themselves time to reflect, what changed? As they said, we're not going to just do business as usual and sing and entertain on top of this, but we need to slow this down and find out what God is doing. It took a while, but incrementally, there was a restructuring of their entire framework. They no longer saw Jerusalem as the place that they must go to encounter God, but even in the midst of the tumult, in the challenge and the lament, what emerged from there is a different theology. What emerged from there was a fresh and expansive faith. It was after the exile that they discovered that God is in Scripture and that God is in prayer, and most importantly, that God, not most importantly, but also that God is in community. It was not until the exile, as they began to search for new ways to encounter God and to find meaning, that they liberated their faith and liberated their thoughts, realizing that God's best is not just in the place of worship, but God's glory can be felt sitting across someone whose mind needs to change, loving someone who doesn't think like you until they see the unconditional love of God. My prayer, like them, is as we take a beat to not do business as usual, that we emerge from this place with a faith that cannot be confined to the four walls of this church, but one that has experienced not just here, but one that goes with us into the recesses of our daily life. And my prayer for you and for me is that we're not just world changers, but as we refuse to flow over this whack beat, my prayer is that we're faithful witnesses. And if nobody goes with us, I pray that you have the overwhelming confidence that one day you'll hear, well done.